Hi, I'm April. I am a singer-songwriter and music teacher, and today we're going to talk about which instrument is best for you. The first thing to consider is what kind of music you like to listen to. You can start with bands and artists that you really like, and then think about what kind of instruments they're using in that music. If you really like rock, you might want to play the drums, or the electric guitar, or the bass. Whereas if you're into jazz, you might want to pick up the saxophone, or the upright bass. You can start by looking at the instruments that are specifically found in the genres that you like to listen to. It's worth noting though that there are tons of artists who like to kind of stray from the typical instruments in their genre. The metal band Apocalyptica is a great example of this because they're a metal band, but they all play the cello. You might find that playing brass on a singer-songwriter track adds some really nice texture. For an example, click right there. Many instruments are also very versatile. If, for instance, you decide to pick up the steel string acoustic guitar, you can then take that skill and you can translate it elsewhere. For instance, the classical guitar and the electric guitar have exactly the same notes in exactly the same places. You just have to get used to a different feeling instrument and different repertoire. In the case of really versatile instruments, the genre is not going to matter so much because you'll be able to play a whole bunch of things. When you listen to music, what's the first thing that you notice? I'm a total lyric person. When I listen to a song, I immediately zone into what the words are and what the story is trying to tell me. But you might like to listen to the music itself. Maybe you really like the rhythm or the bass line. Take the thing that really stands out to you and use that in your search for the perfect instrument. Some instruments are purely melodic, which means that you can only play one note at a time, whereas others are harmonic instruments, like the piano or the guitar. If you're writing songs, it's usually good to know a harmonic instrument so that you can accompany yourself with all of the things you're writing. For every instrument that you look for, there's going to be a cheaper version and a more expensive version. Classical instruments especially tend to have rental programs. And these are really great, especially for young kids who are going to grow into bigger sized instruments, or for kids who are in the school band and aren't going to need their instrument over the summer, though you should be practicing over the summer either way. Renting an instrument is also great for people who don't necessarily know which instrument they want to play. So if you want to test a couple of different things, rental programs are usually the way to go. Whatever you choose, you're probably not just going to be paying for the instrument itself. You'll also be paying for things like private lessons or group lessons. And certain instruments have specific costs associated with them. An upright piano, for instance, is going to have to be tuned every once in a while. String instruments like the guitar or the violin are going to need their strings changed occasionally. Depending on the instrument, you're going to need picks or rosin or reeds, so keep these things in mind as you budget for your instrument. If you're in school, does your school have a choir or a band? Do you have a couple of friends who might want to start a rock band? Do you have access to private lessons in your area with a specific instrument? It's generally much easier to find a guitar teacher or a voice teacher in your area than it is to, say, find a teacher in Renaissance lute. If there aren't people in your local area, that is totally fine. There are still online lessons, and you can still find community groups full of people who can geek out about your instrument with you. There are fantastic communities for just about every instrument under the sun if you take a look on Reddit, Facebook, or Instagram. Do you live in a row home or a duplex where your neighbors are constantly going to complain about the noise level? Do you live with your family or with a partner who you might be a little nervous to practice in front of? Some instruments are just really, really loud. And if this is something you're nervous about, then the trumpet probably isn't your instrument. But there are also lots of quiet sounding instruments, and there are lots of electric instruments that you can plug headphones into. And your lifelong dream of being a drummer does not have to end because of noise level. It's totally normal to practice with drum pads or pillows. Do you have to go places with your instrument very often? The harp may be the prettiest instrument you've ever heard, but it's a pain in the butt to move around. If you don't tend to travel a lot and you don't intend to play any gigs, then getting an instrument like the harp may be totally worth it. Pianos are also notoriously difficult to move around, but most venues you're going to play at are going to have a piano. In fact, many hotels have a piano in the lobby. And if you're not sure, you might as well just get a keyboard. It's obviously much easier for a vocalist to just show up at a gig and be ready to go than it is for the drummer who has to break down their entire drum set and bring it with them to the gig. But that only really matters if portability is something that's important to you. The ability to move your instrument is also really important if you tend to fly a lot. Do your research about which airline you're taking and what their policies tend to be, but keep in mind that you have to check most bigger instruments. For these situations, it's great to have a small instrument like a flute or a ukulele. You can also use MIDI keyboards with your computer, or you can find a travel guitar, like these ones. Vocalists specifically have the really difficult struggle of having an instrument that is in our bodies, which means that it's completely unique. Nobody else in the world has your instrument. But it also means that you've got to treat it really nicely because you cannot just go out and buy a new one. So if singing is something that you want to do, you're gonna have to stop smoking, drink a lot of water, get adequate sleep. Many of the singers I know sleep with a humidifier, or go entire days without speaking because they've got a gig coming up. Even your menstrual cycle can affect the way that your voice sounds on a given day, and that can be really frustrating. Do you like cutting your nails? For most instruments, you're gonna have to just cut your nails completely off, or you'll sound like this. If, however, you want to be a classical guitarist, you're gonna have to grow out these nails and chop these ones. Essentially, you're using these fingers to press and these ones to pick. So your nails have to actually be shaped kind of like guitar picks. If this is something you're serious about, you're gonna have to spend a fair amount of time shaping and maintaining your nails. I have asthma, and when I was a kid, my asthma was particularly bad, which meant that I had a specifically really hard time with woodwinds and brass. This isn't to say that I could never learn them, because I literally sing for a living. But if you also have a lung condition like asthma, it might not come to you quite so naturally, and you're gonna have to spend a lot of extra time on breathing. Granted, you'll have to work on breathing either way. There are also learning curves with instruments like the guitar, where your fingers might hurt a lot at first. Your fingertips are probably very soft and squishy, which means that building up those calluses might take a couple months. You might not have the muscle in your biceps yet for a really long drumming session. So for these instruments that can be a little bit uncomfortable or painful at first, keep in mind whether you feel comfortable being uncomfortable for a little while. If you don't like subjecting yourself to discomfort, or if you'd prefer to pick something up that's a little bit easier on the get-go, I would recommend the piano or the ukulele, which are both pretty easy starter instruments. It may feel like there are very few instruments you can play with one hand or no hands at all, but that's not true at all. There are tons of ways to go about learning an instrument. You can always learn to sing, which doesn't require the use of any of your limbs, but you can also use one of these funky contraptions to play the harmonica. Where is my harmonica? Harmonica! There are tons of things you can do on the piano with one hand. You can use a loop pedal to make a fuller sound, or you can just layer stuff in GarageBand or Logic. Lastly, how does your brain work? If you're the type of person who likes to learn things based on shapes, you may find that the guitar is an easier place to start. Whereas if you tend to like the analytical, organizational parts of music, you might want to start with something like the piano. Take a look at the mechanics of the different instruments, and figure out what feels like it would be the most comfortable or the most exciting for you. Keep in mind that learning one instrument is a lot like learning one language. There will always be more to learn on the instrument you pick, but once you've learned one, you can totally translate that knowledge to other instruments. So whatever you decide, make sure that you practice, make sure that you put the time in, and try to have fun while you're doing it. And you're gonna be great. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, be sure to leave a like, let me know in the comments, subscribe, and ring the little bell if you would like to be notified the next time I post.